Stop everything you're doing right now, because what I'm about to reveal will fundamentally change how you see silver forever. The mainstream financial media has been feeding you a carefully crafted narrative, and today we're going to tear that curtain wide open. The next 60 days could separate those who saw this coming from those who get blindsided in the most painful way possible. Most people are staring at silver charts like they're watching a movie. They see green, they feel happy. They see red, they feel scared. But what they don't realize is that the real story isn't happening on those charts at all. The real story is happening in vaults, in warehouses, in shipping containers, and in boardrooms where decisions are being made that will reshape the entire precious metals landscape. And if you've been waiting for someone to give you the green light to pay attention, consider this your wake-up call. The green light doesn't exist. By the time everyone agrees it's safe, the opportunity has already left the building. It's a brand new day here at Currency Flow, and I want to start by asking you something simple. Comment below what time you're watching this video right now. I want to see where in the world our community is tuning in from. Are you watching at midnight? Are you catching this during your morning coffee? Drop that timestamp because it helps me understand who's really paying attention when it matters most. Now, before we dive into the meat of this, I need to address something important. There are channels out there copying our content, stealing our research, and confusing our community. If you value what we build here at Currency Flow, I'm asking you to do one thing. Hit that subscribe button and drop Currency Flow in the comments. This signals to the algorithm who the real community is, and it helps protect what we're building together. Also, I've left some important links in the description below. You'll find our premium membership link for those who want deeper analysis, our WhatsApp channel for real-time updates, and some bonus resources that complement everything we're covering today. Check those out after you finish watching. Now, here's the promise I'm making you right now. By the end of this video, you're going to understand something that 95% of silver investors completely miss. You're going to see why the price you see on your screen might be one of the biggest illusions in modern finance. And you're going to have a framework for thinking about this that most financial advisors have never even considered. But here's the thing. I'm also going to challenge one popular belief that sounds incredibly smart but could actually destroy your portfolio if you're not careful. So stay with me until the very end, because that's where everything clicks into place. Now let's talk about why I titled this video the way I did. When I say they're hiding this, I'm not talking about some shadowy secret society meeting in underground bunkers. I'm talking about something much more practical and much more provable. I'm talking about the disconnect between what the paper market says silver is worth and what the physical market is actually doing. And that disconnect, it's getting wider, it's getting more obvious. And at some point, something has to give. Let me paint you a picture. Imagine you have a warehouse full of a product that everyone wants. Now imagine that on a computer screen somewhere, people are trading claims on that product back and forth millions of times per day. The problem is the number of claims being traded is vastly larger than the actual product sitting in that warehouse. For a while, this works fine because most people trading those claims never actually want the product. They just want to profit from the price movement. But what happens when real buyers show up and say, actually, I want the physical thing. Deliver it to me. That's when the game changes. That's when the paper price and the physical reality have to reconcile. And that's exactly what's starting to happen in silver right now. Now, I know some of you are thinking, come on, this sounds like conspiracy talk. And I get it. There's a lot of noise out there, and it's hard to know what's real. But here's the thing. I'm not going to ask you to believe me. I'm going to show you the data. I'm going to walk you through the logic, and then you can decide for yourself. Because here's what I've learned after years of covering these markets. The truth isn't always dramatic. Sometimes the truth is just math, and the math in silver right now is telling a story that most people aren't ready to hear. Before we get deeper, let me tell you about something exciting. We're running a silver giveaway this month, and getting entered is simple. All you have to do is like this video, make sure you're subscribed to Currency Flow, and leave a comment. In your comment, tell me either your favorite type of silver to stack or your price prediction for silver over the next 12 months. That's it. Like, subscribe, comment. We'll announce the winner in an upcoming video. And if you're new here, welcome to the Currency Flow family. If you're a returning member, you already know we deliver on our promises. And if you've had success using the information from this channel, please share your story in the comments. It motivates others and shows that this community is the real deal. All right, let's get into the substance. Let's start with something that most people fundamentally misunderstand about silver. And this one piece of knowledge alone could save you from making a very expensive mistake. Silver is not just a precious metal. Silver is an industrial commodity with a precious metals problem. Or maybe it's a precious metal with an industrial commodity problem. Either way, it lives in two worlds simultaneously, and those two worlds are about to collide in a way that creates massive volatility. And that collision, that's where the shock is going to come from. Here's your first cliffhanger. The reason most silver investors get crushed isn't because they're wrong about silver. It's because they don't understand the timing mechanism that drives the price. And that timing mechanism is about to accelerate in a way we haven't seen in over a decade. Stay with me because I'm about to break this down piece by piece. Now let's talk about something that should terrify anyone paying attention. The silver supply situation is not what most people think it is, and the reason it's not what people think is because the mainstream narrative has been carefully constructed to keep everyone calm. Here's the reality. You cannot simply turn on silver production like flipping a light switch. Unlike gold, which is primarily mined for gold, a massive portion of global silver supply comes as a byproduct. That means silver shows up when miners are digging for copper, zinc, lead, and other base metals. Think about what that means for a moment. Even if silver prices were to double tomorrow, miners can't just respond by producing more silver. They would have to increase production of copper, zinc, or lead to get that additional silver. And the economics of those metals dictate whether that happens, not the economics of silver. This is what I call the byproduct trap. Silver is held hostage by the production decisions of other metals, and that trap is about to spring closed. According to the most recent industry data, total global silver supply has been hovering around 1 billion ounces annually. Some projections have pushed that number slightly higher, toward 1.03 or 1.05 billion ounces, but here's the critical point. That number is not growing in any meaningful way. Now let's look at the demand side, and this is where it gets really interesting. Industrial demand for silver has been accelerating rapidly. Solar panel production alone is consuming silver at rates that would have seemed impossible just a decade ago. Electric vehicle infrastructure requires silver. 5G technology requires silver. Medical devices require silver. Water purification requires silver. And the artificial intelligence build-out that everyone is so excited about? It requires massive amounts of power infrastructure, and that infrastructure requires silver. When you add up all the industrial demand and then layer on investment demand from people buying coins, bars, and ETFs, you get a number that has been consistently exceeding supply for multiple years running. Let me say that again because it's important. Demand has been exceeding supply for multiple consecutive years. In normal markets, when demand exceeds supply, prices rise until they find equilibrium. That's basic economics. But silver hasn't been behaving like a normal market, and the reason it hasn't been behaving normally is the paper market mechanism I mentioned earlier. The paper market has been absorbing the pressure. Contracts get traded back and forth, creating the illusion of supply that doesn't actually exist in physical form. And for a while, this works, but it works on borrowed time. Recent market analysis has estimated the annual silver deficit at over 100 million ounces. Some estimates put it even higher. That means every year the market is consuming more than 100 million ounces more than it produces. Where does that extra silver come from? It comes from existing inventories. It comes from vaults. It comes from stockpiles that have been accumulated over decades. And here's the cliffhanger. Those stockpiles are not infinite. In fact, there's growing evidence that some of the largest silver vaults in the world have seen dramatic reductions in physical inventory over the past 3 years. When those vaults run dry, the paper promises and the physical reality will have no choice but to reconcile. And that reconciliation will not be gentle. Now, I want to address something that the bears love to bring up. They say that technology is reducing the amount of silver needed in solar panels and other applications. They say efficiency gains will solve the supply problem. And technically, they're not wrong about the efficiency part. Yes, the amount of silver per solar panel has been decreasing. But here's what they conveniently ignore. The total number of solar panels being produced is exploding at a rate that far exceeds the efficiency gains. Let me give you a simple analogy. Imagine you're eating pizza. Someone tells you that each slice now has 10% fewer calories. Great news, right? But what if you're eating twice as many slices as you were before? Your total calorie intake is still going up, even though each individual slice is lighter. That's exactly what's happening with silver and solar. The world is installing so much solar capacity that even with efficiency improvements, total silver consumption for photovoltaics continues to climb. And solar is just one piece of the puzzle. We haven't even talked about the silver requirements for the electrification of the global transportation fleet. We haven't talked about the silver demands of the semiconductor industry. We haven't talked about the silver that will be needed for grid storage and power distribution. When you stack all of these demand drivers together, the picture becomes clear. The world needs more silver than it's producing, and that gap is not closing. It's widening. Now, some people hear this, and they immediately want to run out and buy as much silver as they can carry. And I understand that impulse. But I want to caution you against making emotional decisions based on a single piece of the puzzle. The supply deficit is real. The industrial demand is real. But understanding what drives short-term price movements requires a different lens. Because in the short term, the paper market can create all kinds of chaos that has nothing to do with physical fundamentals. That's why I always tell our currency flow community to think in time horizons. What's true over the next 10 years might be very different from what happens over the next 10 weeks. And your strategy needs to account for both. Here's another cliffhanger for you. There's a reason why certain major buyers have been quietly accumulating physical silver without making headlines. And that reason connects directly to what's happening in the global power structure right now. We're going to get into that in the next section. But first, I want to make sure you're still with me. If you're finding this valuable, take a second to hit that like button. It helps the algorithm share this with other people who need to hear it. And drop a comment letting me know your biggest takeaway so far. I read every single comment, and your feedback shapes what we cover next. All right, now we're getting into the territory that most financial channels are afraid to touch. We're going to talk about the war between paper and physical. And I call it a war because that's exactly what it is. It's a battle for control of the price discovery mechanism. Let me explain what I mean by paper versus physical. The paper market is where contracts trade. These contracts represent claims on silver, but most of them are settled in cash, not in actual metal. Traders buy and sell these contracts millions of times per day, and the price that emerges from that trading is what gets quoted on your screen. The physical market is different. The physical market is where actual metal changes hands. Someone takes delivery of bars or coins. Someone stores silver in a vault. Someone uses silver in a manufacturing process. In a healthy market, the paper price and the physical price should track each other closely. If paper says silver is worth $30 an ounce, you should be able to buy physical silver for roughly $30 an ounce plus a small premium for fabrication and handling. But that's not what's been happening. The premiums for physical silver have been elevated for an extended period. At times, the gap between paper price and actual purchase price has been wide enough to make you question which number is telling the truth. And here's the uncomfortable question that nobody wants to ask out loud. If physical buyers are consistently paying more than paper price, which market is actually setting the real value? I spoke recently with a market analyst who has been tracking precious metals flows for over 2 decades. I asked him directly about this paper-physical divergence, and his answer was illuminating. He said the paper market works as long as most participants never demand delivery. It's like a game of musical chairs where there are 10 players but only 2 chairs. As long as the music keeps playing, nobody notices. But the moment the music stops, 8 people are going to be left standing. And the music, according to him, is showing signs of slowing down. He pointed to something that most retail investors completely miss. There's been a consistent pattern of physical metal moving from west to east. London vaults have seen significant outflows. Metal is being shipped to Asia at rates that tell a story all by themselves. Why would this be happening? Because when trust in paper claims starts to erode, sophisticated buyers want the real thing. They don't want a piece of paper that promises silver. They want silver they can touch, store, and control. And who are these buyers? They're central banks. They're sovereign wealth funds. They're ultra-high net worth families who understand that real wealth isn't a number on a screen. It's tangible assets that survive currency crises and financial resets. Now let me add my own skeptical lens here because I think it's important to stay balanced. Not every movement of metal is a conspiracy. Sometimes logistics explain shipping patterns. Sometimes vault changes reflect regulatory adjustments or operational decisions. But when the pattern persists over years, when the direction is consistently the same, when physical premiums stay elevated instead of normalizing, that's when you have to start asking harder questions. Here's one of those harder questions. If paper and physical are diverging, what happens when industrial users who absolutely need silver for manufacturing can't get enough physical supply? They can't settle for a cash payment. They need the actual metal to build their products. When that squeeze happens, the paper price becomes irrelevant to them. They'll pay whatever it takes to get the metal. And that dynamic can create explosive price moves that catch paper traders completely off guard. Let me give you a mental model that helps visualize this. Think of paper silver as the shadow of the physical metal. Under normal conditions, the shadow follows the object perfectly. But when the light source starts moving, when conditions become abnormal, the shadow can distort. It can stretch. It can even seem to move independently for brief periods. But here's the thing about shadows. Eventually, they always reconcile with the object casting them. The shadow cannot exist independently forever. And when it snaps back, the movement is sudden. That's what many analysts are watching for in silver. The snapback, the moment when paper and physical reconcile. Now, I want to address a counter-argument because intellectual honesty matters. Some people say the paper market provides valuable price discovery and liquidity. They say it allows producers to hedge their production and manufacturers to lock in costs. And they're right. Those are legitimate functions. The problem isn't that paper markets exist. The problem is when paper markets become completely disconnected from physical reality. The problem is when the volume of paper claims vastly exceeds the underlying physical base. The problem is when the tail starts wagging the dog. And right now, there's evidence that we're in tail-wagging dog territory. Here's your next cliffhanger. The shorts in the silver market, the traders who profit when prices fall, are sitting in one of the most vulnerable positions they've been in for years. And if they get caught in a squeeze, the move could be historic. But to understand why that squeeze might happen, we need to zoom out and look at the bigger picture. We need to look at what's happening with central banks' interest rates and the global monetary chess game. That's coming in the next section. And trust me, this is where the pieces start connecting in ways that might blow your mind. Before we continue, let me remind you to check the description for our premium membership link. The premium content goes deeper than what we can cover in these public videos. If you're serious about understanding these markets, that's where you want to be. And our WhatsApp channel gives you updates between videos so you're never caught off guard by sudden moves. All right, let's keep building this picture. Now we need to zoom out because silver doesn't exist in a vacuum. Silver is connected to gold. Gold is connected to currencies. Currencies are connected to interest rates. Interest rates are connected to central bank policy. And central bank policy is connected to the geopolitical chess match that's reshaping the entire global order. Let me start with gold because gold always leads the narrative. Gold has been printing all-time highs recently. We've seen headlines of gold trading well above previous records, and that's not happening by accident. Gold rises when confidence falls. And confidence has been taking hits from every direction. Geopolitical tensions in multiple regions, trade disputes that keep escalating, political uncertainty in major economies, debt levels that would have seemed impossible just a generation ago. When gold makes a statement by hitting new highs, silver eventually gets pulled into the conversation. But silver moves differently than gold. Gold is the steady elder statesman. Silver is the wild younger sibling with something to prove. Silver tends to lag gold in the early phases of a bull market. It watches from the sidelines while gold gets all the attention. But when silver decides to move, it moves with violence. It catches up and often overshoots. The silver to gold ratio has been stretched to levels that historically precede major silver rallies. Now let's talk about interest rates, because this is where most people get confused. Conventional wisdom says that higher interest rates are bad for precious metals because metals don't pay interest. When you can get 4 or 5% in a savings account, why would you hold gold or silver that pays nothing? That logic sounds smart, but it misses a critical nuance. What matters is not the nominal interest rate. What matters is the real interest rate. The real rate is what you get after subtracting inflation. Here's the current situation. Interest rates have risen significantly over the past few years, but inflation has also remained stubbornly elevated. In many developed economies, the inflation rate has been running close to or above the interest rate you can earn on safe assets. That means real rates have been hovering near zero or even negative in some cases. And when real rates are near zero or negative, the opportunity cost of holding precious metals drops dramatically. This is one of the most important concepts for our currency flow community to understand. Precious metals thrive in environments where holding cash loses purchasing power. And despite what the official narratives might tell you, we're still in that environment. Now let's add another layer. Government debt. The major economies of the world have accumulated debt levels that are almost incomprehensible. The interest payments on that debt are becoming a significant budget item. In some cases, interest expense is growing faster than any other category of government spending. This creates a policy trap. If interest rates stay high, the debt burden becomes crushing. If interest rates are cut too aggressively, inflation can reignite. Central banks are walking a tightrope, and they're running out of room to maneuver. What does this have to do with silver? Everything. When governments face impossible debt situations, history shows they typically choose inflation over default. They choose to let the currency lose value gradually rather than admit they can't pay their obligations. And when currencies lose value, hard assets priced in those currencies tend to rise. This isn't speculation. This is the playbook that's been used repeatedly throughout history, and there's no reason to believe this time will be different. Now let's talk about geopolitics, because this is the wild card that most investors underestimate. The global order that's existed since the end of World War II is under pressure. The dominance of the dollar as the world's reserve currency is being challenged, not directly, but around the edges. Countries are settling more trade in their own currencies. Central banks are diversifying their reserves away from dollar-denominated assets. Gold is being accumulated by official institutions at rates we haven't seen in decades. Why would central banks be buying gold if they believed the current system was stable? They wouldn't. They're buying because they're hedging against a future that looks different from the past. And here's the connection to silver. When the monetary system undergoes stress, people naturally gravitate toward assets that have served as money for thousands of years. Gold and silver both fit that description. But silver is more accessible to regular people. An ounce of gold costs thousands of dollars. An ounce of silver costs a small fraction of that. If there's a rush toward hard assets during a monetary crisis, silver becomes the people's money, and that potential demand from millions of individuals seeking protection could overwhelm the available supply. Now let me address energy, because energy is the hidden variable in all of this. Energy prices affect everything. They affect production costs, they affect transportation costs, they affect inflation, they affect geopolitical power dynamics. When you hear about conflicts in oil-producing regions, don't think of it as just a foreign policy story. Think of it as an inflation story. Think of it as a central bank story. Think of it as a precious metals story. If energy prices spike, inflation gets harder to control. If inflation gets harder to control, real interest rates stay negative or go more negative. If real rates stay negative, precious metals become more attractive. See how all these dominoes connect? That's what makes this moment so potentially explosive. It's not one factor driving the silver thesis, it's multiple factors aligning simultaneously. Here's your next cliffhanger. There's a specific scenario involving energy disruption that could send silver into a parabolic move almost overnight. And that scenario is more plausible right now than it has been in years. We're going to get into the practical framework in the final section. I'm going to tell you exactly how to think about positioning and how to avoid the mistakes that trap most investors. All right, we've covered a lot of ground. We've talked about supply deficits, paper versus physical, central bank games, and geopolitical chess. Now it's time to bring it all together and give you a practical framework for navigating what's coming. First, let me challenge a popular narrative that could get you hurt. Many people believe that silver is a get-rich-quick trade. They see the potential for explosive moves and they imagine buying at 30 and selling at 100 within a few months. Here's the reality check. Silver can absolutely make dramatic moves, but timing those moves is almost impossible. Silver is the most emotionally violent metal in the retail space. It will shake you out. It will scare you. It will make you feel stupid right before it makes you feel like a genius. That's why I constantly tell our currency flow community to think in terms of positions, not predictions. A prediction is a guess about what will happen. A position is a stake that you can hold through volatility because it's sized appropriately for your situation. If you're stacking physical silver, focus on consistency. Don't try to time the perfect entry. Add regularly over time and focus on accumulating ounces, not on the daily price fluctuations. Pay attention to premiums and buy when premiums are reasonable. Avoid panic buying when everyone else is scrambling. If you're investing in silver through the financial markets, focus on allocation. Precious metals should be a component of a diversified portfolio, not your entire portfolio. The exact percentage depends on your personal situation, but the key is that it's sized so you can hold through drawdowns without panicking. If you're trading silver for short-term gains, respect the volatility, use proper position sizing, have clear exit rules, don't let a winning trade turn into a massive loss because you got greedy. Silver will humble you if you're not careful. Now let me give you the framework I use for thinking about precious metals in the current environment. Ask yourself 4 questions. First, is inflation likely to stay elevated compared to interest rates? If yes, real rates stay negative, which favors metals. Second, is government debt growing faster than economic output? If yes, eventually something has to give, likely through currency devaluation, which favors metals. Third, is geopolitical instability increasing or decreasing? If increasing, safe haven demand rises, which favors metals. Fourth, is the supply-demand balance for silver tightening or loosening? If tightening, fundamental pressure builds, which favors metals. Right now, all 4 of those questions point in the same direction. That doesn't mean silver goes up tomorrow. It means the setup is constructive over time. Now let me share something that most people overlook. Sentiment. When silver is hated, when everyone has given up, when the comment sections are filled with disgust, that's often when the best opportunities appear. When silver is loved, when everyone is excited, when predictions of $100 are everywhere, that's often when risk is highest. The crowd is usually wrong at the extremes, and your job as an investor is to avoid getting swept up in the crowd's emotions. Here's a practical tip. Pay attention to how quickly dips get bought. If silver drops and the dip gets bought aggressively, that tells you strong hands are accumulating. If silver drops and the dip lingers for weeks, that tells you conviction is weak. The character of the pullbacks tells you a lot about who's in control. Now, I want to ask you 2 questions, and I want you to answer in the comments. First question, do you believe the paper price will continue to lead the silver story, or do you believe the physical market will eventually force a reconciliation? I want to hear your reasoning because this is a critical debate. Second question, if we get a major spike in silver, do you think it will be driven by retail excitement or by industrial and institutional scrambling? Tell me what you think the real catalyst will be. These questions matter because understanding the driver of the next move helps you prepare for how that move might unfold. Now let me share the shocking conclusion I promised you at the beginning. Here it is. The silver price you see on your screen is not wrong because someone is evil. It's not wrong because of a grand conspiracy. It's wrong because the market structure creates a natural disconnection between paper trading and physical reality. That disconnection can persist for long periods, but when it corrects violently. The shock that's coming to the silver market isn't about manipulation being exposed. It's about reality reasserting itself. It's about the math catching up. It's about supply and demand refusing to be ignored any longer. And here's the part that should make you sit up straight. The preconditions for that reconciliation are in place right now. Inventories are under pressure. Industrial demand is relentless. Paper positions are extended. Physical premiums remain elevated. The monetary backdrop favors hard assets. We may not know the exact timing, but the setup is screaming that something significant is coming. So what do? You stay patient. You stay diversified. You build positions you can hold. You avoid letting headlines bully you out of your plan. And you remember that the best investors aren't the ones who predict perfectly. They're the ones who prepare adequately. That's the currency flow philosophy. We don't pretend to have a crystal ball. We focus on understanding the landscape and positioning intelligently. Before I sign off, let me remind you about the resources in the description. The premium membership gives you deeper dives with exclusive analysis. The WhatsApp channel keeps you updated between videos. And the links to our social channels let you stay connected with the community. If you found value in this video, smash that like button. If you want more content like this, make sure you're subscribed with notifications on. And if you've had success applying the insights from Currency Flow, share your story in the comments. It motivates others and strengthens our community. All right, that's it for today. Stay sharp, stay calm, and never let the noise bully you out of your plan. This is Currency Flow, and I'll see you in the next one. And just so we're completely clear, nothing in this video is financial advice. I'm sharing education, context, and my way of thinking so you can make better decisions for your own situation. Always do your own research or consult with a qualified professional before risking real money. Until next time.